we
Yes.
on? All right.
Let's do
Okay.
it.
Woohoo! So it gives us great pleasure to be with you and so pleased to be invited to this prestigious and really important event contributing to the global perspectives on aesthetic education and celebrating Maxine Greene. I am Pam Burnard, a professor of arts, creativities and educations at the Faculty of Education, University of Cambridge. James?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is James Biddulph. I'm the executive head teacher of the University of Cambridge Primary School, which is a relatively new school built in Cambridge. And I've known Pam for many, many years. In fact, she was my tutor when I first started teacher education and guided me along the way to constantly think about my practice, really building on Maxine Greene's work throughout our careers together. We've danced together many times along this journey.
And so what we've done is produce for you a 20-minute video, which has been filmed at James's school, which, by the way, has a strapline, Releasing the Imagination. And in this 20-minute video, we walk through the school, we have conversations, and we feature other kind of snapshots of events and practices and spaces in this school that truly, we think, embodies Maxine Greene's legacy of releasing the imagination. Basically, that'll be 20 minutes, and then we produce a 9-minute sort of slideshow broadening out the conversation about releasing the imagination and aesthetic education in and beyond schools in Cambridge and beyond into the UK. And then we'll take your questions. So, David, take it away. This is Maxine, empathy, curiosity, release.
Rising from the fire, ignites the spark within us, and we can travel far.
Pam, a very warm welcome to the University of Cambridge Primary School on this cold yet joyful December day.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's joyful and celebratory to be here showing and displaying the embodiment of Maxine Greene's living legacy in this amazing school. Thank you for taking part in this interview. You know, Maxine Greene, with her book Releasing the Imagination, which is the strapline to this school, had this view that imagination opens up the windows and shows us landscapes, horizons that we would not otherwise perceive. You know, how do you see that playing out, embodied, performed, engaged, and driving this school, James?
You know, I read that book on a bus in Nepal when I was about 22, and I was interested in education, and it kind of, looking at these mountains, it opened up the kind of, wow, there is another way.
Wow.
And so when, 20 years later, this opportunity arose, I think the university's vision to open up a school that had a different quality about itself was kind of a testament to Maxine Greene in itself. Yeah. Because the university asked a question: what could education be? Yeah. You know, we know the Cambridge Primary Review that asked that question. You know, what should primary education be? Yeah. And so the vision of the school is about possibility. releasing the imagination, celebrating the art of the possible. It's meant to be ambiguous in the way that also Maxine Greene's words and ideas invite conversation, invite people to ask questions. And that questioning and asking bigger, bolder questions was inherent in our thinking about how we set up our school.
Yes, you see that when you walk around the school. There are just explosive, engaging, profoundly wide awakeness, as we walk around the school. And that releasing the imagination was also engaged through research evidence that the architects read, and knowing that the strapline is releasing the imagination. How does that play out in the physical environment itself?
Well, when I welcomed you to the school, those front gates, the design, as well as being a circular design, that kind of nods to democracy and those traditional and indigenous and the examples of humanity sitting in circles for all ages. This circle is an important democratic notion of education, that we are all included, all our voices are important in determining the quality of an education. So, we say, how does the youngest child, who's the most shy, have an opportunity to speak their truth or their story? And so when I welcomed you, those world map gates look straight through the school to the next. They're looking beyond all the time. So Maxine Greene's work
Very
about
much
looking beyond,
Very much
always,
so.
never quite being, but always becoming. And that sense of progress and movement is inherited.
Not yet.
I am not yet.
Yes.
And so the circle, the learning streets, which are our corridors, you can never see quite round the edge. There's always what's next to come, what's round the corner, what's possible. And that kind of opens up those not only the questions, but the sense of teacher as stranger.
Yes, beautiful. The what if and what next and what else. And we see that with those amazing panes of glass that frame the inside of the circle, and where each pane is really of glass is significant. Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, the building had a piece of commissioned artwork, and there was lots of discussions about what they may be. We wanted a school that has three ambitions: inclusion, ambition, and innovation. And so, how could the fabric of the building show people and indicate that we are truly inclusive? So we worked with an artist who took pictures of, she didn't take pictures of the sky, but there are 66 images of the sky from around the world, all taken at midday. And each sky is different. And each sky is the same. We're all under the same sky, but we're all under different skies. We all walk our own truths, tell our own stories. When I did my PhD with you, Pam, that we discussed that the world is essentially storied. And I think that notion comes through in Maxine Greene's work, and it's why we were so attracted to the idea of voicing and questioning and being comfortable with the uncertainties that arise in a diverse and inclusive community.
Yes, it really embodies aesthetic education and more. Maxine said, and I wondered, about her views on curriculum and opening up. As she said, and I quote, "Think of the curriculum as an open window," which makes me think of those window panes, sky, the pane of glass, and see what you can see and what comes through. And Maxine Greene's teachings, remain the foundational bedrock of how we use art as forms of democracy and empowerment for all. And in terms of this sort of aesthetic space, everywhere you are in this school feels like an aesthetic space. How have you choreographed that, and how have you voiced children in that process?
Well, it's lovely to have a piece of artwork, but as all of us know that when we put paintings in our houses, they soon become just part of the fabric. We forget that they're there. We see them all the time. And so importantly, it needs to make sense to people. It needs to make sense through a co-construction of meaning. So with the artwork, for example, that we're under the same sky, we use that as a stimulus for an arts week, and where we invited dancers and musicians and visual artists to work with children to explore what that might mean. And you came to that inaugural celebration performance of our understanding, our meaning making of this idea we're under the same sky. Individuals working in community, in our own stories, in a book that is written for humanity. That kind of was the idea. And so the artwork, the dances that evolved allowed children to have a sense of who they are in a wider community.
Yeah.
You also, when we walked up the stairs to my office, that kind of bouquet of hope, we called it.
Yeah.
It's an installation piece where every child in our community painted a flower in response to the feelings about the war in Ukraine and how they felt about it. Through painting, the children were able to talk about their feelings and then bring it together. But again, it tends to this idea that we are individual spirits working together in a community that is not only within our school, but one that's more interconnected.
It's a beautiful performance of the living legacy of Maxine Greene. Maxine Greene had this to say: part of teaching is helping children create themselves. How does that manifest itself in the curriculum and with the teachers here?
Well, through our professional development, we've really prioritised creating a new discourse about education. You can't do that by mandating new knowledge. You can't tell teachers and you can't tell teaching assistants this is what it means to have diverse ideas, or this is what it means to kind of challenge what we understood or have understood about education. So we need to create a professional development that allows uncertainty. So we talk about spaces of uncertainty. I share the spaces of uncertainty that arise in my life as the head teacher of the school. And so through a lesson study approach, for example, we've worked with people with expertise in their academic traditions from outside the school to try and spark new ideas, to disrupt our thinking. And it's through the disruption that new openings are possible.
Again, inspired by Maxine Greene's words and the living legacy, she said, our very realisation that the individual does not precede community and the ground of a creative and critical community can be opened in our teaching in our schools. Can you tell us about this amazing book series and how that really performs, again, the mantra of Maxine Greene?
Yeah, in our, it's called Unlocking Research. What we've tried to do is each chapter is co-written by an academic and practitioners to show this journey between the different forms of knowledge, not in hierarchy, where practitioner wisdom and academic expertise sing in harmony, or they dance together, or they disrupt one another's thinking. But there's a new way forward. So in this book about unleashing children's voices in new democratic primary education, John Beldelcino, who's written a lot about Maxine Greene, and I wrote a chapter that has an imagined dialogue between Maxine Greene, Helena Sissou and Bell Hooks. And this dinner party, as we acted these three huge voices about democracy, asked questions. In the first course, for example, inclusion as the core of democracy. And the acted version of Maxine talks about the primacy of community and the primacy of democracy, and how we have to enable young people and educators to explore what that means for them. So you can't mandate, you have to create dinner parties of conversation in schools. You have to create opportunities for difference to arise. In a UK context, which is so confined by what governments need and what the inspectorate needs, it makes it the greater challenge to find those windows of possibility.
And we're so inspired by that and the call of Maxine Greene to sing, quote, and to use your imagination, tapping into courage in order to transform. And seeing this book series where you've got the voices of teachers with researchers, with academics, and from people beyond the academy, I think she would be so pleased, because you've found and co-authoring ways to in terms of possibilities and the making of activist citizens. How is that happening here through the curriculum? Activist citizens. Quote, Maxine.
Well, there's another quote that I really love. It's we designed to nurture appreciative, reflective, cultural,
Yeah.
participatory engagements. That's what we do with our professional development. But at the core of our curriculum design is to nurture compassionate citizenship. And we looked at that in 3 different ways. How are people thinking? Thinking, being, and then enacting.
Yeah.
And often in schools we do the thinking and maybe sometimes the being, but we never get to enacting. What are these enactments that young children, and indeed the professionals who work with young children, where are those participatory engagements, those enactments of this idea of compassionate citizenship?
Yeah.
And then around that we hold oracy and dialogue as really important. Inspired by Maxine Greene's invitation to create spaces of dialogue, we looked at the work from the Cambridge Primary Review, from Neil Mercer's work about oracy and dialogue. How do we get children really talking towards diversity, talking towards difference?
Yeah.
Because often in schools we like harmony, we like things to be okay. We don't create spaces to sit with this uncertainty of we don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's so important at this point, because Maxine Greene said, we are never done becoming what we are meant to become. There is no arrival. And even in this time when we've lost Maxine's physical presence among us, she is not done, nor are we. And we see this embodied in the building, in the practice, in the community, and in every space in this school just sings of Maxine Greene. You know, how did you choreograph that? Especially knowing your strapline is releasing the imagination, which really, you know, embodies her work. But how did you choreograph all of that into this amazing space called the University of Cambridge Primary School as the executive head teacher?
Well, I try every day to come into my office and see it as a space where I'm a stranger. And that Maxine talked about that. You come into your space with new eyes, and you can I look at my space and say, who am I? What's my purpose? Who am I with? And then from that starting point, create an intention that is much more heart-led than kind of intellectually led.
Yeah.
Because when we can connect with people, we say in our curriculum design that above everything else, relationships are important. And within that and it's not a very British thing to talk about, but we bring love into it.
Yeah.
How do we build loving relationships?
Yeah.
Because that's when children don't need a behaviour management strategy as such.
Yeah.
They need a relationship management strategy.
Yeah.
And that's what we've tried to do. So I think to answer your question, I've had to get myself out of my way and to allow for that lovely quote, I can't remember who said it, but to make the stumble part of the dance.
Oh, beautiful.
To draw from that choreographic metaphor that you used.
Yeah.
Because education is not a certain thing. Learning is not certain, but we can choreograph through the culture, through the visions. Our values of empathy, respect, trust, courage and gratitude are all part of the fabric in the ways that we work as adults, but also in the way we want to kind of inspire children in the community.
Yeah.
When we were inspected in 2018, I remember saying to the inspectors then, we would never be the finished article at this school. And it reminds me of kind of what Maxine Greene said.
Yes, and to end with her words, she said, "We are never done becoming what we are meant to become. There is no arrival, but that is founded in possibilities and love."
And what I haven't been able to show you quite as much as I'd like to today is all these lovely children, because they're busy beavering away. We wrote this song. It's called Release the Imagination. It was co-written by the first educators who ever stepped foot into this school.
Yeah.
It's our manifesto.
Yeah.
It's our manifesto for the children in this community, but it's also a thanks to Maxine and her wise words that inspires much of what we do here.
Yes, Maxine Greene's living legacy carries on in this school through your practices. Thank you, Dr. Biddulph.
Every child has a voice, every bird has a song, everyone has a choice to have someone belong. Fly like the skylark, reaching for the sky. Here there are no limits, we are learning how to fly.
Thank you, David. And thank you, James, for working with me with this. I'm now going to share a screen to work onto the coda to this presentation with more endless possibilities that we'd like to share in relation to aesthetic education. And let me just see, where is it? You're seeing all of my drawers at the moment. This is so embarrassing. You're like inside my mind. And I know it's a disgrace, but I'm a busy person and it's the way I work. Okay, 3 computers and you've just seen the big one. Now, let's move. We have a 9-minute, put the timer on, to take us through to 30 minutes total and then questions. So let me just go to the first slide, which is back here. There we go. So we'd like to kind of broaden the discussion across Cambridge with other organizations beyond schools, but also working within schools, and just look at the way aesthetic education is being advanced. This is very much Maxine Greene's philosophy of aesthetic education. James?
So this quote really frames our discussion, our presentation here. Speaking of passions, engagements, and imagining can become a way of speaking in an expanding community that takes shape when diverse people, speaking as who and what they are, come together in both speech and action to constitute something in common among themselves. So, for example, we ask ourselves, what are we doing? What's our purpose? As well as asking, how do we do something and why are we doing it?
And so what follows are some examples from Cambridge and UK communities advancing Maxine Greene's legacy of aesthetic education. There are a lot of people in the UK working, underpinned by the philosophy of Maxine Greene. And to name them, I'm going to leave people out and upset people, and they'll say, oh, I wasn't mentioned. So I'm just going to kind of keep it local and say that there are pockets of incredible work going on. Is it across the land? No, but we are part of Europe, despite Brexit, and there's a lot of work also being done in partnership with our European colleagues and our Australian colleagues. As you know, I'm Australian as well. Now, if we look at these 2 URLs that are actually now in your chat, they are of organizations in Cambridge that work to connect children with their local surroundings in order to really explore and expand children's capabilities to look at their powerful imaginations beyond the school. So there's really a diverse population. There's sort of town and gown, very diverse demographics in Cambridge and its surroundings. And so these arts organizations are absolutely crucial in terms of empowering and encouraging young people to express themselves and to explore. And I'd ask you to look at those URLs in your own time. You'll see, for example, children making what's called fantastical maps of places where young children, their schools, their families, imagining worlds as well as documenting sort of cartographic images of their own world. And it's a fantastic website which will give loads of arts-based practices which are led by artists, teachers and educators, and of course involving parents, museums, hospitals and other sites. James.
Yeah, and there's a community in the north of England called a town called Leeds, city called Leeds, that is called Lilac, which stands for Low Impact Living Affordable Community. They live together for many years now, and the picture on the left, top left, shows a piece of artwork. There's actually the hay bales upon which the whole community buildings are built. So the whole community is built on hay. And built from hay, and they actually use hay as a kind of metaphor for the kind of place making, community making that's really embedded in that community. And then this community group Transition Together also engages communities across England that we're thinking of working in just north of Cambridge in a community that has a landscape that's not dissimilar to a desert. It's called the Fenlands, and it is an endangered landscape. And so we're trying to work with dancers and artists to try and help the community understand what changes they need to make to their community as their lives change quite considerably in the next decades or so.
Yeah, and on the right-hand side is an example of a pop-up community. We've got a lot of empty shops in Cambridge. Brexit has kind of decimated a lot of small businesses. And what they've started to do is have pop-up events, often led by artists, working, again, with aesthetic education, getting people to think about, climate change, getting to think about sustainability, getting to think about engaging children in participatory community ways. So if we look again back to Maxine, we come back to her all the time because her words just drive us, they inspire us. James?
Yeah, so it links back to my school. For me, or for us, the child is a veritable image of becoming, of possibility, poised to reach towards what is not yet, towards a growing that cannot be predetermined or prescribed. Really, the challenge we have in the UK is that the curriculum and the government expectations are so rigid that they've almost predetermined what children should be. So we ask the question based on that quote from Maxine, is what do we want our young people to be like when they're 40, 45? What kind of readers will they be? Will they be voracious? And how creative will they be? How open-hearted will they be? And then we work backwards from that big question to thinking, let's not predetermine their journey. Let's think with them in a community-focused way.
And part of teaching is helping people create themselves. Now more than ever, we're seeing teachers, being really oppressed by the performativity agenda of tests, tables, and targets, and to release them. To find ways to have them empowered and engaged and feel an agency in a climate that is closing in and down on them is, I think, one of the works, a huge work that Maxine Greene does. Here is an example of one of the books in the series that James was speaking about. And you see it's rooted in collaborative research, collaborative dialogue between teachers and academics, or teachers, artist teachers and researchers. And here you see teachers opening up, co-authoring change, living with that uncertainty of doing things that are new and be embodying I am not yet.
And just to refer back to the film, that we had an imagined dinner party with Maxine Greene, Helena Sissou and Bell Hooks discussing these three different courses at the dinner party, one about inclusion as a core of democracy. The acted Maxine said, we enter a space as stranger, it's like being the other, being not of that place and seeing afresh what it could mean. And then the main course was liberty in democracy. And the acted Maxine said, it's not enough to give space to each voice. We have to also listen for the nuances in what, how, why people say what they say. Thank you, Pam.
It's a beautiful way to, that's a technique, James, that, to use in teacher education, to use in initial teacher education, to use with children, to write a play, around the voices of theorists. And I think if Liz McKinlay is in the room, we've done this with theorists at conferences, and you can really embody the thinking and it stays with you.
And of course, dessert is the best part of the dinner party. So we left social imagination to the last. So, what do we do in what might be in our deficit society? What do we change? We're required to take action to repair or renew. We're all familiar with that very wonderful quote. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah. So it is the marriage of theory and practice. They are inseparable. They are inseparable. So starting with Maxine's, possibilities, moving into possibility thinking, which has been, well researched with Anna Kraft and others, myself included. James, in your PhD, you advanced it further.
Yeah, so the diagram on the right is an example of how we move from Maxine to Pam and Anna Kraft's work to thinking about creative learning in children's homes. where I did my PhD, and identifying what we now use in school as a space of uncertainty, that learning from the home, bringing the notion of space of uncertainty into our practice in school.
Yeah. So spaces of uncertainty, there's this whole idea of transdisciplinarity, lots of people looking at STEM to STEAM, and really that's underpinned by aesthetic education. There's an example in one of the books of STEAM Garden with researchers and teachers in Scotland, and they're asking, what if the learning spaces of school grounds could be extended outside? Things could be otherwise. Maxine, what if learning communities could engage with much more problem solving about the real world, of being in the world and becoming? What if we could justify this as activity of value, where scientific and artistic creativity, dismantling subjects silos, comes into play? So this is a rhizomatic view. I think Maxine would be really pleased with this. In fact, I think if she was still here on this planet, she would have developed a rhizomatic diffractive rereading of what happens when sciences and arts come together and there is this new construction, a melding, a melting, knowledge creation, and really transcending this whole business of subject silos that we're all fed up with. You inspired me, Liz McKinlay, and others yesterday, asking the question and hearing that Maxine Greene was, in a time where she was reading and writing about dead white authors, dead white philosophers. The same was true when I did a Bachelor of Music. I only played dead white German composers. They were in my room, Bach and Beethoven. They were all there. I knew them better than I knew myself at 18. What is it? What is it that we are not acknowledging women academics, women inventors, creators from across the globe, from all continents? This is one of the messages that I think comes driving through in the voice of Maxine Greene. Finally, James.
And so we end this bit by talking about openings. So teaching for openings will always be fraught with risks. Yet only by daring to seek such openings can we hope to survive and perhaps even transform an uncertain world, which we think in this current climate is even more needed than ever before.
So 2 thank yous, one to Maxine Greene
and one to all of you for this wonderful Maxine Greene community.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, so back to you. Stop sharing. I can't see a thing. I've just freaked out for a moment. Thank you. David, you're an angel that walks this earth. So ready for questions.
That was awesome. I just have to gush. And look on the right in the chat. I know you're doing double duty now to see. You cram so much in such a short time. And I think it's everybody's envious desire to have a whole community that you've created in this primary school. Thank you. So open it up, please. Questions, comments?
Dan.
Good morning, and thanks, Pam and James. It's great to see all your work and all the tentacles. Yes. Big heart love from Australia. Now 6:36 a.m. Pam, I'm exhausted just listening to, I don't know how you're never tired. That's what I was just saying to Peter Cook, my colleague from Brisbane. It just doesn't matter what time of day it is. You're so full of energy. It's inspiring.
I'm inspired by James. I'm inspired by Maxine. I'm inspired by the Maxine Greene Institute and this community. What we all look like when we go off screen, it can be quite different. But
yes,
it's this magnet. It's a magnet, a force of vision. But thanks for mentioning.
Indeed. Well, my question is around resources. One of the really inspiring things about your presentation and about the work that I know you've been doing for so long together is this, powerful partnership by an institution, between an institution like University of Cambridge and a partner school. And while we do have some of those here in Australia in what we call GO8 or sandstone universities or leading universities like the University of Sydney, where my colleague Robin Ewing, good morning, Robin, is based. Not all universities or not all of our contexts have that kind of resourcing. And also just extending a conversation I've been having with my colleague Liz McKinley, who's from Australia, but beaming in from Manchester. I guess a part of our conversation has been around, resourcing, and that extends to the relationship and partnership between the global North and global South. How do we, and I know Ruth and Holly and Amanda are asking this question in regard to this event and going forward from this event as well. How do we I guess, share the resources in a way that allows those of us in subaltern, as it were, or minoritarian or satellite, or what other kind of adjectives you'd like to use, but where we're not in the so-called center of attention or resources or white Western knowledge making centers, great centers full of resources like the University of Cambridge, and the Euro-American centers of knowledge production. It can be very challenging just working out of the global South to try and make our voices heard, to try and maintain these connections that this event has provided. So I guess it's a little bit of a provocative question, but I know you love that, Pam, and I know you'll respond. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was totally inspiring.
I'm going to invite James first to address the question of Cambridge and the University of Cambridge Primary School, because I think you'll be a bit surprised.
Yeah, so the school was required to be built because the university had a small piece of land, a reasonable piece of land on the northwest of Cambridge, and they were going to build some homes. So they built a new community there, and as one of the planning requirements was to build a primary school. So the government funded the primary school, and we only get funded by the government. We don't get any additional money from the university at all, because for various reasons. But what we do have is the intellectual. We have the potential for the intellectual resource. And that is really difficult to gain, even though the school is sponsored by the university, to try and get academics largely to acknowledge that primary schools are a petri dish of ideas and possibilities. That has been a real struggle. It's only people like Pam who are open and enlightened and read Maxine Greene's work that has been able to foster those relationships. Otherwise, it's very kind of difficult to make. But it is purely funded by the government, and so we struggle. I've got no money, basically. Yeah. So we do it. We do it through people.
I understand that, James, but I was referring to probably a broader definition of the word resources than just funding.
If you can go on, James, with the work that you do with teachers in India. I know you make many trips to India, and one of the things about this school, which is quite unique, is that it was included in the REF, which is the evaluation framework that all universities have to go through in this country. Usually, REF impact studies come out of centres, or you've won a large bid and it's made impact ripples across the nation. This was the first time we put in the school as a impact case study, because it has rippled influences across regions, but national and international. Just a little bit about the international brief, and please, reach.
Yeah, so we worked closely with colleagues in India and in Nepal, and also we have via some of the university's research links with schools in Uganda who are interested to know, for young people who feel very lost about their community and their world, and knowing what they can do to stop climate change, for example, what actually they can do on their streets. So we're working, but not in a we know the answer and we're going to kind of deliver the answer to you, but work in a collaborative working ways. We work with creative engagement projects with various countries, and the book series also created a relationship with countries in far Eastern Europe that don't have the same resources as we do in the northern part of Europe.
Yeah, and in terms of India, I mean, I'm involved in STEAM research with Finland, Scandinavians, and in people, a group of researchers and teachers who are working with arts, mathematics practices. So apart from a research agenda, there is, of course, the Real Centre in the Faculty of Education that does very serious work and wins very big bids to do with girls' education. So it can't sit, it has to be many people, finding resources, in a faculty, across the university.
And similarly, Pam, sorry, Pam. Similarly, MasterCard has just given the university a very large donation, and the whole purpose of that, I think it's $100 million, is to fund students from the global south to study in Cambridge, and then to go back to the globe, to the countries of origin, to affect change in their communities.
So I feel, I see the glass half full. That's the first thing. And I think there's a real appetite, and there is absolutely work being done in this university and others in this country which look beyond this country. And if you look at the REAL Centre, you'll see incredible work being done with girls' education in India and across Africa as one example. But thanks for your question. It's an important one. So we have more hands. John. Hi.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for your inspiring presentation, the work you're doing there, and really keeping alive, Maxine's legacy. And I could go on and gush, but I'd rather offer a loving but pointed critique, if I may, of what I think is missing from this discourse. I knew Maxine Greene, and I was a frequent guest at her salons in her apartment. And I knew Maxine as a very radical political thinker who used to talk a lot about the 60s. And she wishes that she was younger back then, that she could join the protest marches and all that stuff. She's a person who mentored Bill Ayers, right? Who was in the Weather Underground, okay? And what I find missing from this discourse is any sense of politics, any sense that we have a world in which authoritarianism is on the march. I just watched a Noam Chomsky YouTube, 1 minute YouTube, where he says we are in the most dangerous time in the history of humanity right now, between the nuclear threat, between authoritarianism and global warming. And I didn't hear any of that in your discourse. My wife and I, we co-produced a TV show on education, the arts, and social change, inspired by Maxine. And we were nominated for the equivalent of a Nobel Prize in education. It's called the Yidon Prize. We didn't win, too bad, but we were nominated. And we bring these hard-hitting critiques to the media. I often think, how come there are no education pundits on the big TV shows, right? They have legal pundits, they have business people, they have political people, nobody from the world of education. Why is that? I think one reason is that we're so isolated in our theories. And creativity, isn't it wonderful, right? But they're storming the Capitol. What's creativity going to do to save our democracy? Until we can put that piece together. I actually had a conversation with Chuck Schumer earlier last year. And I said, and this is at a political club in Greenwich Village.
James, you have so much to say, and John, sorry. Yes. You have so much to say, and I hate to cut you off, but we're already into our next one. Can you save it until we have our discussion at the end of the day?
I can't stay on for the whole day. I have other work to do, but could you respond to that critique?
We'll write into the chat. James and I will write into the chat, because we purposefully put forward a very celebratory kind of engagement. But I can assure you they're underpinning loads of political agendas and engagements, and right there at that school and in our work and in the faculty and in the university. So apologies if it presented the glass way too full. And it is always the balance between, bringing the realities of the balance of a world that is so discombobulated at the moment and so dangerous. And just to bring a little bit of inspiration via a celebration of Maxine. But we'll write into the chat and address how we actually do address and live with and engage and push against the political struggles of today. James, join me in the chat.
Thank you,
so
John.
much.
John,
Thank you,
I'm John.
everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Pam, I really appreciate how much you've shared with us the half full and the positive and what can happen and what you've done and what they've done at the Tarbut movement and up in Quebec and in Mexico. This is really about a celebration of what can happen with Maxine's work, and absolutely we need to have another conversation, another seminar around the issues facing us politically. But what is happening is the kinds of things that you and James have done here is just so commendable and beautiful. I have so many questions I keep wanting to ask you about, how does, we have to move on, but, how does your students in University of Cambridge interact with the primary school? How is it a petri dish? I want to know more about that. I want to know more about, the Aristotelian dialogue. I saw one example of them talking about aliens on the moon, the early childhood, and it was so beautifully facilitated. Every child had a point of view, and it sort of seemed like the basis of this creating yourself in your pedagogy at the primary school. I could go on, but I just commend the two of you so much, and thank you for being here today and opening us to the rest of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, James, for your time, for your energies as well. Thank you, everyone. Great questions. Thank you.
Amanda, did you want to say something before we move on? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
It's a quick question about, would love to know more about how these incredible experiences carry over once the children leave primary school and go into the secondary.
Yeah, that's another whole dimension. Yeah. So let's keep that going and, have a seminar on this, Pam. Pam's the one who says, have the seminars and they will come. So let's keep going.
The politics of education. Let's do it.
Yeah, indeed.